My father came unglued because he just thought that I was going to die. I was going to do something dangerous by traveling. So I started the blog really as a way to keep my friends and family apprised of where I was.
Okay.
And I wrote, every night. And nobody knew that this was ever going to turn into a business. I traveled for 6 months and I think I did 17 countries. God, that almost killed me.
In 6 months,
But
17
in
countries.
6 months,
Wow.
17 countries. Yeah, I'll never do that again.
Hello, Barbara. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I'm so excited to hear about your travels. Thanks so much for joining. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. I'm doing great. Remind me again where you are in the world.
I'm in London, and I usually
You're
ask,
in
how are you
London.
doing today? But as I can see from
Yeah.
your background, it's already in the night. So I was just wondering how your day was.
Right. Well, I live in Thailand, in northern Thailand, and yeah, my day was great. So I went out and wandered around a while and went to my favorite coffee shop and dropped my laundry off. I don't do anything for myself anymore. My life is very simple here.
Okay. So we're going to talk a bit about, yes, we're going to talk about Thailand, but we're going to be talking about your life as well at the beginning. I just like to ask our guests to introduce themselves and just tell us a bit about themselves and how is their life and how they ended up there, because you are not from Thailand, but we're going to be talking about Thailand. So I'm all curious to hear about this. And I also want to know more about you because I have never met you. And furthermore, we exchanged just, I don't know, 2 3 emails. The reason I know about you is through Desi, who joined the podcast in episode 3, if I'm not mistaken. So she said, oh, you know what, you should speak to Barbara. And I'm like, okay, let's see what Barbara has to say. So why don't you tell us, who are you, where are you from, how did you end up in Thailand, and everything else you would like to share.
Well, let me start by saying that I met Desi when she was, I think, a program manager or a tour director with Viking
Yeah.
Cruises. And she's the most amazing woman. And, she now does tours of her own, and she's just passionately in love with her country, Bulgaria. And we became good enough friends that I've actually gone and stayed with her at her home and toured with her and her mother. And so Bulgaria has become one of my favorite countries in the world. So yeah, if you want to know about Bulgaria, go check out that episode that Desi did.
So did you eat pancakes at her place?
I ate, oh God, they never stopped feeding me the entire time I was there. I mean, we toured all the Northwest area. Everywhere we went, there were these huge piles of food on the table. I swear I gained 10 pounds. But maybe actually they made me dance it off.
Okay. So you dance Bulgarian folklore?
Well, I'm not a very good dancer, so I don't know if you could call it dancing, but I moved.
Okay, that's well put. You move. Well,
So
okay, go on.
as for me, my name is Barbara Weibel, and I have one of the very first travel blogs ever. It's called Hole in the Donut Cultural Travel. And I started it in late 2006, and it was kind of just a fluke that it happened for me because I'd spent 36 years in corporate life, hated every minute of it. I just did not like corporate politics. I was very successful. And toward the end of my corporate career, I got really sick, and it took them a long time to figure out what was wrong with me. I had Lyme disease, and it was 5 years before they found it. And I was pretty sick. I really thought I was going to die. And I I looked at my life one day while I was sort of laying in bed and crawling between the bed and the bathroom. And this was after they'd found out what was wrong with me, but the treatment turned out to be almost worse than the disease. And I thought to myself, what good is all this money you're making if you're never going to get to do the things that you've always wanted to do? Because I thought I might die, and I decided that if I could get over this, that I would um, give my boss notice, and I would put a backpack on and walk away from all the corporate life and money and things. I was addicted to material things, and just go recreate myself as a travel writer. And I had been a photographer all my life. And so it took me a year to get well. And you can just imagine what my family thought. You're going to give up this really successful, career where you're making all kinds of money, and to do what? Go write stories, take pictures. And then my dad, I'm American, and so it's getting much better, but there is a certain fear in America about independent travel. And for many years, people thought, God, if I go by myself, I'm going to get kidnapped by
Mm.
a terrorist and held for
Hmm.
ransom. You know
Yeah.
that. And my father came unglued because he just thought that I was going to die. I was going to do something dangerous by traveling. So I started the blog really as a way to keep my friends and family apprised of where I was.
Okay.
And I wrote, every night. And nobody knew that this was ever going to turn into a
Hmm.
business. By the time I came back 6 months later, I bought a round the world ticket and I traveled for 6 months. And I think I did 17 countries. God, that almost killed me.
In 6 months,
But
17
in
countries.
6 months,
Wow.
17 countries. Yeah, I'll never do that again. But by the time I came back, I had, I don't know, something like 1,600 people reading the blog. And I thought, gosh, maybe there's a way to make a living out of this. And here I am.
Well, such an inspiring story. I literally got goosebumps, especially when went to the park, when you just left the stability. And I can imagine even now it's still shocking to people, but even back in 2006, like, oh, you're gonna leave your job that they pay you, like you're gonna go into nowhere, like, this is such a great story. So how it's such an honor to speak to one of the first travel bloggers in that way. Then
Aw, that's nice. Thank you.
thanks so much. So how, I'm so curious, they have so many questions in my head now. It feels like I can do a separate episode of just your travel journey, but and I'm gonna make a note of that. But how about Thailand? Like, why Thailand? When Thailand?
Okay, well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I can't ever remember. I think the first time I ever came here was 2003 or maybe 2004. And I was managing 4 Remix franchises at the time. And one of our agents had married a Thai woman. And she spent 6 months a year in Thailand, and 6 months they had an import export business, and 6 months in the States. And I was kind of looking for somewhere new to go. And he said, well, why don't you just go visit my wife? And, she's there now and she'll show you around. And I had never had any interest in Asia at all. And from the moment I set foot in Thailand, I don't know whether it's past life, I don't know what it is, karma. This place just resonated with me. Probably helps that I had, I'd studied Buddhism for a number of years. I consider myself a Buddhist.
Wow.
I'm vegetarian, and so this is like the perfect place in the world for a vegetarian to live.
Hmm.
I had even before I began, the blogging career, I really wasn't comfortable with the culture of the United States, which I saw as being a little too commercial. And I'm not criticizing, because I was certainly guilty of all the same things. I had a nice house, I had to have a bigger house. I had a nice car that was a couple years old, had to have a new car.
Hmm. Yeah.
Had to have the jewelry, the clothes, everything that goes with that. And it's kind of like, um, I felt like I was always in search of happiness and trying to fill an emptiness that with material goods. And somehow in Thailand, I felt something different. There's a certain value about not only Thailand, but I think a lot of Asian cultures that's so much different from the West, that I just felt like I belonged here. And I had, my departure, shall we say, from corporate life, it happened in stages. And so at first I kept my house and hit the road. And then 6 months later, I came back and I sold the house. And then I had a property in Florida to sell. So I moved to Florida and had got an apartment there. and I was there for 2.5 years. But I did mostly domestic travel during those times. I was traveling half the time and at home half the time, and I just wasn't. I knew I had to get back on the road internationally, and so in 2009, I gave up the apartment. And in those days, blogging was in its infancy, so you didn't make a lot of money, and I couldn't afford to have a house and travel.
Mm.
So I hit the road with no home. I let go of the apartment and just traveled full time with a suitcase for 8 years. And so during those 8 years, I had in the back of my mind, I know now that I don't want to live in the United
Mm.
States. I don't want to retire there, but where am I going to retire? And I sort of had a short list. And over those 8 years, I went to all those other places that I thought might be an option for me, and nothing was as good as Thailand. So here I am. And I didn't do it lightly, because I'd been coming here for 17 years. It'll be 17, almost 18 years soon. And I've been here now permanently as a base for 3 years. But for the 5 years before that, I wintered here. So I spent the first winter was a month, the second year was 2 months, and then finally, after 5 years, I was up to 5 months. And I thought, oh, for heaven's sakes, Barbara, just rent an apartment.
Okay, wow, that's very interesting. So how long you been in Thailand now?
Well, I've been living here permanently for 3 years. It'll be 3 years in November, I think.
Mm-hmm. So you see yourself,
But traveling here for 17 years.
yeah, but you're seeing yourself like staying there for a while now.
Yeah, as long as the Thai government lets me stay, I'm here. First of all, I'd go into, what do they call it, withdrawal from Thai food if I ever left.
And again, what you said, it's so true. Like we get caught in that thinking, like we have stuff and like, okay, now I earn more money, let's buy more stuff, and we get caught in that thinking. And then I try to Dubai and Bali. Like I wouldn't count Dubai, but when I went to Bali, you can see that people are more chilled, more relaxed there. They don't aim to have much more. They live in compounds with these big houses where they have three generations there, and it's such a different story there. It's just another example of what traveling does to you. It just opens your mind. So I mean, whoever, if you're listening, watching this blog, just this podcast, just travel. It doesn't need to be further, as close also works as a beginning. Fantastic. Well, Barbara, whew, I'm getting goosebumps for the first time already, and we just started. Let's talk about Thailand then. So first of all, how is it with the flying? Like, where am I gonna land? Is there only one airport, or how is this happening there?
Well, first of all, I have to address the issue with COVID, because
Okay.
right now you cannot visit Thailand.
Ooh.
We haven't had any international flights allowed into the country since, I think, April is when they shut them down. So the only people who can come now are Thai nationals who are repatriating to the country, guests of the government, things like that. Now they're talking about some programs to allow tourism back in, but it's going to be a slow process. And frankly, I'm pretty sure Americans are not going to be allowed to come in for a long time because of what's happening with, the level of infection
Mm-hmm.
and deaths in America. And so they're talking about what they're referring to as travel bubbles, where probably Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam and maybe Myanmar at some point will be allowed in, Taiwan, New Zealand, the places that have controlled it better than
Mm-hmm.
others. But I mean, let's assume that at some point we're going to go back to normal,
Okay.
hopefully, because right now I can't leave. My travel is on hold, with the exception of domestic travel,
Mm-hmm.
because I can leave if I want to, but if I do, I can't come back. And this is my only home.
I see.
So I'm here for the foreseeable future,
Okay.
which is, if I got to be stuck somewhere, this is the best place. But at some point when we can all travel again, like we used to, there are airports everywhere in the country. The biggest ones are in Bangkok. There's two there. One is called Savannaphum, and the other one is Don Muang. And Don Muang is mostly, there are some international flights out of it, but mostly it's domestic, where Savannaphum is the international airport. But then there's a network of airports all over the country, because Thailand's a pretty big country. I mean, it's long and kind of skinny at
Hmm.
the south, and it has a big fat. Yeah, there you go. On the screen, you've put it up now,
Yeah.
and it's a big fat part in the top, and then a long, skinny peninsula
Hmm.
that goes down, and it adjoins Myanmar to the west and Malaysia to the south. So there's an awful lot to see here.
Hmm.
I live way up in the northwest in Chiang Mai. And then Bangkok, of course, is, I guess, if you took it from north to south, it's about the center of the country.
Hmm.
And it sits on the Gulf of Thailand. And then down south is where you find the beaches. And there's also, in addition to airports in most of the major centers now, there's a pretty good rail network, and there's also buses. You can get anywhere in a bus in Thailand, and the buses. Yeah, we've got some pretty good deluxe buses that are comfortable and cheap. But I tell people nowadays that we've got so many discount operators like Air Asia or Thai Airways or, oh gosh, Nok Air. There's a couple of others. It's pretty cheap to fly.
Okay. So the way I see it, we can go two ways from here. One, we can talk about a specific city you would wish and dig more into the city. Or two, we can do something what we did in the New Zealand episode where we did itinerary for, let's say, 5 days, and then you can tell us, okay, maybe you start with Bangkok, you stay there for 2 days, then you travel south, go to the beaches for 3 days. Like, what would you advise? How would you like to continue?
Oh gosh, 5 days. I wouldn't even know where to start with 5 days.
Too
Um,
little? Too less?
it's too little, and
Yeah,
of
just
course
an
it depends a
example.
little bit on. Okay, let's say a
A
week. All
week.
right,
Okay.
and let's not include flight time. So
Okay.
like a day on the front to come and a day on the
Of
back
course.
to go
Hmm.
back. And of course, when you're going back, you're going probably west, and so you gain time. So you gain, like, if you're going back to the States, you gain 12
Hmm.
hours. If you go back to like London, you gain 6 or 7, depending upon the time of the year. So 7 days of traveling. Ideally, I mean, I've been coming here for 17 years, and there's so much of this country I haven't seen yet. Um, Probably, although I'm very much an independent traveler,
Yeah.
I have the time to do that. If I get somewhere and I'm really intrigued by that place and I want to stay an extra couple of days, I just stay a couple of extra days
Oh, so you don't have
because
a
I
like a
don't
strict
have.
plan?
No, I
Okay.
have no plans. I never have
All right.
plans. So I might have, like, if I'm going down to Bangkok or something, I might have a night or two booked, but then after that, I just kind of wing it because I never, in all these years of traveling, 14 years almost now, I've never had a problem getting a hotel room at the last
Hmm.
minute. So, and I tend to like to travel locally. Once I get on a continent, I tend to like the buses and the trains and the ferries and that sort of thing. So there always seems to be plenty of room. So I would say that if you had a week, you would want to spend, certainly you're going to land in
Hmm.
Bangkok. And then I would say you fly south to the southern peninsula is where all the beaches are. And you have some very famous destinations. You've got Phuket, which is
Heard of
the
it.
second largest island, I believe.
Heard of it so many
Uh,
times.
yeah, have you?
Yeah.
It's not my favorite destination.
Because it's too busy?
In Well, it's busy. I don't think they're the best beaches in the world.
Ooh,
Um, but if you are from Phuket, there you
this
go.
is quite
There's a
famous.
picture. Actually, I think that this is Krabi that you're looking at, which is not too, this is probably Riley Beach in
I thought
Krabi.
I thought you're going to
And
say, actually, no, I think that's my picture.
no. But you can see how beautiful the beaches are. I mean, the white sand beaches. Phuket doesn't really have that. And what you're looking at
Oh,
on
okay.
this photo that you're popping up now, those are long-tail
Hmm.
boats. and they have a 3-stroke Chinese diesel engine that they like hold us. It's on a stick that they can leverage in and out of the water,
Yeah.
and so they can get into all these little coves, and it's a stunningly beautiful landscape down there. And so most first-time visitors go to places like Koh Samui is a very popular island. PP Islands,
That I
PHI.
have heard as well.
Well, and the photos that you're showing, those rocks are what are called limestone, karst limestone. And they are, there's only a few places in the world that have this kind of incredibly beautiful karst limestone
Hmm.
formations. And you can kayak in and out of caves inside of them. And so the southern part, if you were limited in time, you might want to go to Riley Beach, PP, Koh Samui, or pick one of those and use it as a base and take day trips to the others, which is possible. And then you would fly back into Bangkok. And I think 3 days in Bangkok is plenty.
So you would say,
See,
so is there a way to fly directly to Phuket, for example, or it's just a domestic flight
oh
there?
yeah, oh absolutely,
Okay.
oh yeah. There's airports in all those
No, I
places.
mean, like if you're coming
So,
from USA, can you go directly to Phuket? That's what I
oh,
mean.
I don't. There are flights directly into Phuket, but it wouldn't
Mm.
be from America. You'd
Okay.
have to change. But there, for instance, you can take Thai Airways from Frankfurt, Germany,
Hmm.
into Phuket,
Oh,
I think.
interesting.
And there's a couple of other places. So you'd have to go into one of the like Thai Airways hubs, but you can fly directly into Phuket, and you can clear customs and immigration there as well.
Okay. No, the reason I ask is because you said, land to Bangkok, then fly down south, then go back to Bangkok. So I was wondering if we can, avoid that in a way.
Maybe an itinerary would be better if you landed in Bangkok and spent like 2.5 days in
Yeah.
Bangkok and then flew south. The problem is that Bangkok's right in the center of everything.
You
So
need
you're
to
going to
go
have to do
through
more
it.
than one
I
flight because
see.
you want to go north and you want to go south.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe it's a better. Bangkok is a huge, busy, noisy city.
Mm.
And I have to say that in the beginning, I was not much of a fan of Bangkok. And even for many years, it was like, oh, okay, I'm going to spend 3 days here and then I got to get out of here. And I think that there's a lot to see in Bangkok. And over the years, I just spent 8 days there the other day or the other week
Yeah.
because we have no tourists. And to see the Grand Palace, the Wat Po with the reclining Buddha, Wat Arun, the Temple of Dawn, those three sites with no tourists in them were astonishing. The last time I went, it was so crowded with tourists and tour buses
Hmm.
full of tourists that I literally almost got pushed down a stairway. This time, I think if I saw 20 people at the Grand Palace in an entire day, it would be an overestimation.
Mm.
So there's never going to be this kind of opportunity again. And I would say to people that if you're thinking of Thailand, come as soon as you can after the travel restrictions end. Because not only are you going to be able to see, now that picture you're showing, that's the Grand
Hmm.
Palace. It's stunning. And not only you're going to be able to see that with no people, it's incredibly cheap. I wanted to stay on what's called Ratanakosin Island, which is where it's the old city. So that's where the Grand Palace is and Wat Arun and Wat Po. And I paid $365 for 8 days.
Mm.
And I didn't stay in a hostel or a guest house. I stayed in a nice
Hmm.
hotel. I could have done it for probably $100 if I'd wanted to.
Yeah.
So, the sooner you come, the less traffic there's going to be, and the better the bargains are, especially down south on the beaches. Oh my gosh, those people are hurting so bad. I feel very badly for, a lot of these places like Phuket. Almost 100% of their economy is based on tourism,
Yeah.
and there is none right now. So, Bangkok, you've got those three things that I mentioned, those three temples. You've got Chinatown. Trying to think, street food, that's a big thing. If you're a shopper, Siam Square has, I'm, I don't know, 6, 8 giant malls that are in high rises that are 8, 10 stories high. Uh, there's tons of museums. There's night markets. The food is incredible. There's long-tail boat tours through the canals because we have a lot of canals here. We're very low in Bangkok because of we're adjacent to the Gulf of Thailand, Gulf of Siam, and so they dug a lot of canals to get around by boats, and a lot of people still live in houses on stilts along the canals. And
You're talking about these canals. So
they
canals are all over the city,
Yes,
and the people are just using boats for transportation.
yes, and what you're looking at, there's a floating market.
Oh, so you're just
And
stuck
so
with
if you
your
go in the
boat?
morning, you can hire a boat to take you around, and you have your breakfast as you float along the canal.
Interesting.
There, and see that picture there is a lot of the houses that have been built along the
Hmm.
canals on stilts.
Okay. Okay, that's very interesting. So the boat is on water transportation is a very big thing apparently in Thailand.
Yeah.
Um. So
And then
yeah, go on.
I was going to say, and then after Bangkok is where you go north to Chiang Mai, where I live.
Okay, but hold on. Let's talk about
Yeah.
Bangkok for a second because we're already here. So, um, can you tell us a bit more about the destinations you mentioned? For example, let's start with the palace. Is there something else
Okay.
to share with us, like something curious?
Well, the Grand Palace is a huge site, and you're going to need most of a day to see it. It is it's the site where the king is crowned. It's at one point it's where the royal family lived. They no longer live there. They live in a separate palace. And the I think Wat Pra Kiao is the name of it, I believe. It's the site where they keep the Emerald Buddha, and it is the what they call the Ubosot, or the worship hall. And the Emerald Buddha is very important to the history of Thailand. Um, it's seen as a symbol of Thailand, and it's seen as, now that it's here, the kingdom is stable, and it's sort of a good luck charm, that sort of thing. It's so revered that they do what's called a dressing ceremony for it. We have 3 seasons here: the hot season, the cold season, and the rainy season.
Okay.
And the Emerald Buddha is clothed 3 times a year. The king comes and climbs up on a ladder behind it, and they dress it for the particular season.
Oh,
Um, the walls of the Ubosat are covered in stories of Buddha's life, hand painted. Everything is, as you saw, those who are looking at the photos, who can see those photos, a
yeah.
lot of gilding, a lot of gold. And this is not just gold paint, this is actually gold leaf. So it's quite stunning. There's a lot of history in terms of the different buildings that are there. And then next to the Grand Palace
Yeah.
is Wat Po, Pho. And it's another, it's probably the second most well-known temple in Thailand. And it is the home for this immense reclining Buddha. And you've probably seen pictures of it. Buddha is lying on his side with his head on his hand and his elbow crocked, And if I'm correct about this, I believe that that's the position that he assumed just before going into parinirvana. I'm not sure I've got that
Okay.
term right, but just before his death. And if you take a look at his feet, which are the gray, yeah,
Yeah.
They are engraved with mother of pearl, and it shows astrological signs and maps and stars and all kinds of things.
Really? It doesn't
Yeah,
seem like, but wow.
yeah. It's abalone, or I think, and mother of pearl.
Okay.
But you see, all that gold you see, that's just gold paint. That's gold leaf.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay, so you'd say, hey, they're very, strange feet in a way.
Well, Buddhist feet are quite revered around the country. So as you go around to different temples, you'll occasionally see things called Buddha's footprint. And a lot of times there will be a big boulder or a rock that have the impression of a footprint. And those are said to be places where Buddha actually stepped. And of course, they've been preserved.
Hmm.
And then the third temple, which is an absolute must.
I just googled the
Um,
footprint, so that's what you would see.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they'll be all around the country, and you're like, okay, this.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I let me back up for a bit and talk about the different things that you find in a temple. Yeah, look at this one. Huge footprint, believed to be the actual footprint of Buddha.
Okay. What do you think about these footprints?
I don't know. I believe in the concept of Buddhism. It's not a religion. It's more of a philosophy, and it works for me. So I don't think that how do I say it? I don't say that I don't believe. I don't say that I do believe,
Hmm.
but I accept the philosophy of Buddhism.
Okay, I understand what you mean. Okay, so you
Yeah.
want to go back to the temples? What did you want to say?
Well, I just wanted to say that there are certain things that constitute the buildings of a particular temple, and here we call them Wats, W-A-T. And the most important building in a Wat is in Bangkok. They're called stupa, S-T-U-P-A. And in the north, they're called chedis, C-H-E-D-I. And those are the places that hold the relics of Buddha. And I actually wrote a story a couple of years ago or so. And I thought, well, how many relics of Buddha can there possibly be? I'm sorry I'm stumbling. I'm getting a little bit of an echo.
Oh, sorry about that.
But how many relics can there be? There's thousands and thousands of chedis and stupas around. Some of them are said to have a clipping of a fingernail. Some of them are said to have a hair of Buddha. But what I discovered is it's not only relics of Buddha, it can be relics of others who have attained enlightenment or were considered very important people in the Buddhist philosophy. So when you see those chedis, those are the most important structures on any temple. Here in Chiang Mai, if I can digress to that for a moment, we have a Wat that's called Wat Suan Dok. And it is the burial site for all of the royal members of the royal family of the Lana Kingdom.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we talk about Chiang Mai. But so those are the places where when people visit them, they should show the utmost respect. That, as well as inside ordination halls and such, you have to take your shoes off to go in. You should never point your feet at Buddha.
Wow.
You need to be quiet. You never touch the head of a Thai person. Your feet are considered the dirtiest part of the body, and so you never point your feet at anyone.
So when you talk to
So,
someone, you need to what? Point your feet away, or
no, it's not that. It's, if somebody asked you a question and they asked you to give
Mhm.
directions, you would never point at that direction with your foot. You would never put your feet up on furniture. If you're sitting in a chair in Thailand, you should not have one foot up and under you because your foot is resting on the chair, and that's considered dirty.
Ah.
If you're taking a photo, one time I was in Burma and I was at a particular factory on a tour, and one of the guests put his foot up on the like a railing that was surrounding the machinery of this factory, and the tour guide got very upset and said, no, 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 don't do that, because you never put your foot on something else other than the ground.
Wow.
You never walk into anyone's house without taking your shoes off. So yeah, I mean, there's certain things that people probably should read up on in terms of Thai culture,
Hmm.
just to know,
Oh
just to
yeah.
know, before you go. You should not, women are not allowed, should not go into the temple without having their arms covered with a short sleeve.
Hmm.
They can't go in without having their knees covered. Now, it's gotten a bit more lax over the years because of the extent of tourism that we have here. But a lot of times in the important temples, like in the Grand Palace, they won't let you in if you're dressed inappropriately, and they'll make you rent what's called a pasin, a skirt, or a
Hmm.
sarong or something to put around you. They're, they're, I get a little upset when people don't respect the culture here. And I think that that's part of what gives tourists a bad name. So I say that because when you're in a temple and you're looking at a chedi or a stupa, you're looking at the most important building, and you should not be standing on a railing or jumping up in front of it so that your feet are in the air and your arms are up in the air when somebody takes the photo, or posing half naked in front of them. I mean, those are the kind of things that actually can get you thrown in jail here.
Yeah, that it. What you're talking about is many people. What they actually do is blind traveling. They just go and they just go for the photo and they just don't care. But when you go to someone's country, it's like you're going to someone's home. There are certain rules, and if you don't follow these rules, it's completely normal to say like, okay, just leave my home. I had enough. And
Exactly.
it's very similar. I went to Abu Dhabi, and I there was this giant mosque there, and you couldn't go with clothes like that, so I needed to rent some clothes to go inside. So that's why I usually like to have a tour guide with me. The Usually how I travel is I go somewhere, I get for the first day a tour guide. He explains me some stuff, I ask questions, and I learn more about the country, what to do, what to see, where to eat, and then the rest of the times I just spend it myself. So yeah, I admire everyone who just doesn't go for the traveling but goes for the experience, to get connected to the culture. And definitely.
Well, and I told you about the Wats here in Thailand, and each of those, it's a square or rectangular area with probably 20 or 30 chetties in it. Each one of those holds remains of the Lana royal family. And there were so many people being disrespectful. You used to be able to walk through it, and now they've closed it off, and
Hmm.
you can only look at it from the outside because of this.
Yeah, that's gonna happen here. Years ago in England, you were able to go close to the guards in Buckingham Palace. Now you can't because people are
Mm,
making fun of them. Hey, 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 look at me.
really?
Yeah.
Trying to make them talk or
Yes,
something,
make
yeah.
them even because they are not allowed to move. They need to, not just talk, but try to get some emotions from them. But
Right.
yeah, you cannot do that anymore. So yeah, that's just the time. Oh, perfect example. I'm not aware. I'm not sure if you know, but Desi, did she show you Beograd Chicken Magura, the cave? Yeah.
Yes.
So in
Yeah.
that Magura cave, maybe you saw the drawings, which are a thousand of years old.
Right.
Yeah.
Have they blocked them off
They
now?
blocked them off because somebody went inside and started drawing on top of them.
No.
Yes. So
I was so amazed that I could stand within 2 feet of
yeah,
them.
yeah. So UNESCO were going to take that project, but they said, okay, if you cannot keep your, stuff, why we should care and keep them? So they just back off. They closed, and I don't think they're gonna open ever again. And it was so. I went to the cave and I just couldn't see it. They just show this picture. I'm like,
Oh, you're kidding
yeah,
me. You can't even go in to see them
no,
from a
no,
distance?
no.
And you see, this is something that this COVID thing has given me pause to think about what I do. Because for a while now, as tourism has increased more and more around the world, And a lot of countries are becoming more wealthy. The citizens are more able to travel. They have more money. The crowds have gotten bigger. And as the crowds have gotten bigger, it's become not as much fun is the only thing I
Mm,
can say, because you're always you can't see anything. I mean, people are impolite, and I sometimes wonder if I have become a little bit a part of the problem, because I have 3,200 articles on my blog talking about more than 100 countries,
mhm.
and sometimes I think, do I really want to write about this, because I don't want the world to
To
know
know.
about it.
Mhm. I
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
what you mean. Yeah, and in Bulgaria, I don't know if you went to, but there are these Rila lakes, which are magnificent, the 7 Rila lakes, and people started going there. I don't know how this happened, but people just started going there, and because they walk around the lakes for so much, it's getting muddy, and they were thinking
Oh,
actually to restrict the people there as well. So I understand what you mean. I really understand what you mean.
yeah, it's a real problem. And yet I try and balance that against the idea that, one of the reasons I started my blog was I feel that a lot of the problems that we have in this day and age can be, I think it's all about fear. We have fear of others who we think are somehow different than us. And my feeling has always been that we might speak a different language, wear different clothes, have a different religion, eat different food, have different customs. But by and large, people around the world are good, and people around the world are pretty much the same. We all want the same basic stuff. We want food to eat, and a place to live,
Mhm.
and safety and freedom and a better life for our children, and that sort of thing. And that connects us as human beings, as one, what I call one human family. And my thought was that, because I don't write stories about the top 10 of this and the top 10 of that. I write stories about my experiences in the places that I go and the people I meet along the way. And I hoped that I would be able to, the message would be that it's not dangerous to travel, that I have been traveling for 14 years now, and I've never had a bad experience. So the only place I've ever had a bad experience is in the United States, when I was robbed in Hawaii many, many years ago. So it's not dangerous. People, I have hundreds probably of stories where people have gone out of their way to help me. And I wanted to get that message across to people, that we don't need to be fearful of one another. So there is that, you got to balance the two things. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that, because I haven't figured it out myself yet.
It's so interesting to listen to and to talk to you about these things, and I think we can talk a lot about these things, but you know I think we can just give another call and then just do another episode on that. But let's try and go back to Thailand, because I yeah, let's try and go back to Thailand, which is the subject for this episode. So we talk. I didn't even remember what was the last. Oh yes, yes, yes. People, how they are not respecting the sites when they go to the temples.
Right.
Do funny pictures and all these things. Okay, so in Thailand we talk about the palace, temples, their shopping centers. Definitely get a boat and try. Go and do it yourself on the canal. Is there something else we can mention here, or we should move north?
There's a ton of things, but frankly, I think that Bangkok is pretty overwhelming for people.
Mm.
And so I certainly would not spend more than 3 days. And I think for a first trip, you could spend 2 days there and just do the basics of the Grand Palace, Wat Po, Wataroon, maybe take a little visit to Chinatown, do a boat trip on the Chao River and into the canals. And you'd have a pretty good feeling for Bangkok.
Okay.
And then I would fly north to
All
where
right.
I am.
Okay. So where do you are? Is
Um,
it a big city?
mm, it's a it's about, oh gosh, I haven't looked at the population for a while. I think the greater metropolitan area, including all of the province, is about 1.5 million people. Um, the city itself, within its boundaries, probably 500 to 700,000, something like that. So it's big enough to have everything that you could want to live here.
Okay.
and yet small enough, that it's not crazy like Bangkok.
Yeah. Google says in
Um,
2019 it was about 127,000 people in the city.
well, but they're talking about the old city, which is the walled portion of the city,
Okay.
and it's grown way beyond that. So yeah, it's much bigger than that now.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So you would say fly to Bangkok, spend a day maybe, fly south, see the beaches for about 3 days, 4 days, fly back to Bangkok, or just to change to
Well, no,
the
I
north.
think you can go directly from, say, Phuket up to Chiang Mai.
Ah, perfect,
You don't have to stop in Bangkok.
perfect.
Yeah,
Okay, so we go
yeah.
to Chiang Mai, and then what's happening there?
And well, Chiang Mai, and I have to tell you just a little bit about the history. The northern part of Thailand didn't used to be part of Thailand. And in fact, Thailand didn't used to be named Thailand. Originally, it was called Siam. And Siam,
Mm-hmm.
you've probably heard The King of Siam
Yeah.
or The King and I, that's that movie. And what happened, this was the Lana Kingdom up here. And the Lana Kingdom, most of the people here came from southwestern China, Myanmar, and Laos. And they merged with Thailand, or which with what was Siam at the time, because they were invaded by Burma, and the King of Thailand offered them uh, Rama V, who he's known as Chulalongkorn, offered the Lana Kingdom protection if they would become part of Thailand. And that happened, I think, I want to say 1914. And so you do have a difference in cultures between the North and the South. Now, I will tell you that when I first came to Chiang Mai some 13, 14 years ago, I didn't I didn't feel the difference.
From south and
But
north, you mean?
now from South and
Okay.
North, I didn't, because it was all so new to me, and it was all Thailand, and the language is, we have a dialect up here, but it's basically the same, and everyone knows how to speak Central Thai. And but the culture here in the North is really much different than in Bangkok. The food is spicier. Um, the lifestyle is slower. Um, there's a gentleness about the people. You hear Thailand called the land of smiles. You don't see that all the time in Bangkok, but I can tell you that 98% of the time in Chiang Mai, people have a smile on their face. They're very considerate. They're very caring. It's the culture here, and I suppose for most of the country this would be true, but I see it more so even here, that the what's the word I want? The contentment or the good of the whole of society is more important than the good of the individual.
So more like the community.
Yeah, community is much more important. There's really three things that define Thailand, and I think that they are stronger up here than they are down in Bangkok or further south, and that's Buddhism, community, and food. There's a saying that a Thai person sits down to breakfast and the conversation is about what are we going to have for lunch and dinner. And that's true.
Really? Oh my god. So it's
It's
food, food,
true.
food.
Food, food, food. It's such an important part of life here.
Love it.
And I suppose that all intermingles with the idea of community as well, because, children don't move out
Yeah.
of the house until they get married, and many times they don't even move out
Hmm.
then. It's a very, very extended family experience here.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say it's
the olders are,
probably similar like what I said to Bali. They live together. But at the moment you're comparing, the north with Bangkok, and I would think in general, so for example, I would be speaking to Germans and they would say, oh, Berlin, no, no, like it's a different country now, you cannot compare us to Berlin. So
right,
in many
exactly the same.
exactly, so most of the world, the capitals are like a different story from the other side of the country. So how would you compare, for example, the north where you are to the south where the Phuket, all the beaches, like the people there and the culture? And
I think the southern part of Thailand has become so over touristed that a lot of the culture has, I won't say it's disappeared, but it's not visible to the average tourist. I'm sure that if I went down there to live and stayed long term and got to know local people, that I would find the culture there. But it's so much about partying,
Mm,
and beach, and that it's Thai culture doesn't seem to be. It's really not the thing that most people who come here are really looking for. Now, there are some places that have made a name for themselves by doing, like little villages where people come and do homestays,
mhm,
and that is a growing market. And Thailand is trying to capitalize a bit on that. Thailand is also well known for its arts and crafts, and so there's air, and Chiang Mai falls under that umbrella because we're known as the cultural center of Thailand. And I just went to the Lana Expo, which is held here every year in a big exhibition center. And four of the provinces, people from all of those provinces bring their handicrafts. So we've got things like metalworking, where they hammer the metal and make the most beautiful cups and bowls, and jewelry making and wood carving and silk production, where they actually spin the silk out of the cocoons. Um, Lacquerware. There's just a zillion different crafts that are done here, which are really not done elsewhere in the country. Chiang Mai is the place where they're produced and distributed through the country.
mhm.
So that becomes such an important part of the culture, and you don't see that in the South.
Okay, I understand. I actually understand what you mean because when, as you said, the economy down south is almost 100% tourism. When you keep coming, we keep receiving tourists, your culture might change in a bit with
It
time.
does.
Yeah, and you need to try to accommodate those tourists, in a way, go to their way of thinking in order to survive and make money. So
Right.
I truly understand what you mean. Okay, so what about the south? What about the place where you live? Like, what can we do there? I quickly have a look. Had a,
In the North, you
yeah, in the
mean?
north, yeah, in
In the
the
North,
Chiang
yeah.
Mai. I really had a quick
Oh,
look, and it looks amazing.
tons of
Yeah.
things.
So what can you tell us?
Well, first of all, the Watts are an important part of the culture here. The old city it's an old walled city. A lot of the wall still remains, although it's been, repaired over the years. But it's 700 years old,
Hmm.
and many of these temples are quite old as well. And so there are three major ones inside the walled city, and two or three that are very important outside the walls. And then when you sort of get done with the Watts, there are lots of museums to see. We have something like, oh gosh, I don't know, 30 or 40 different museums here.
Yeah.
Everything from the National Museum to a Lana Folklife Museum to Chiang Mai Historical Museum to House of Photography, um, to a museum dedicated to the last princess of the Lana Kingdom, who was gifted to Rama V as a consort of the king, and it was done to cement the relationship between the Lana Kingdom and Siam. There's so much fascinating history here. And then on top of that, people who want to do the adventure stuff, you can do trekking to the hill tribes. There is an old quarry here called the Grand Canyon Water Park that has been turned into they've had these great big inflatable rafts and things, that go for a half a mile, and you spend all day climbing around them. We have 5 or 6 major shopping centers here. Um,
Okay.
we have tons of festivals.
Wow. You said going to the tribes?
Yes. Well, so there are. a number of different ethnic groups in Thailand. I don't know how many, but dozens certainly. So you've got people like Thai, Thai Lao, Hmong, uh, Karian. Off the top of my head, those are the ones I remember.
Mm-hmm.
You may uh, you may know the some people call them Karen, but locally they're pronounced Karian, and these are the what they call the long neck women. And at birth, they have shortly after birth, they are have a metal ring
Yeah.
put on their neck,
Mm-hmm.
and then gradually, as they grow, they add
More
more
and
and
more.
more and more rings until it stretches their neck, and they can't take the rings off anymore because if they do, their heads would just flop over. Yeah, so you've got lots of different hill tribes. Each of them have a little bit different culture and a little bit different customs. Some of them um, are great weavers, and they make beautiful what are called pasin skirts. Others make jewelry. Some of them do whiskey production in the hills.
Wow.
There's a whole range of them. And you can actually take a trekking tour where you hike up into the hills and you visit various villages of these hill tribes.
Hmm. So why do you think they're putting these rings? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Hmm. That's very interesting because it goes to.
I took a tour years ago
Yes.
on a visa run where we stopped at a couple of these villages. And I wasn't particularly thrilled because it seemed to me that they were not real villages. That they were sites set up for the tourists,
Oh, okay.
and the kids all wanted $1 every time you took a picture. And so I have not done any of that since then because I just don't think it's legitimate.
Mm-hmm. I see. I see what you mean. Okay.
Now there are ways to visit these villages that are more genuine. So, for instance, you could go stay in a tea plantation up in the
Mm-hmm.
hills. And a lot of the tea plantations have programs where they help the indigenous people, the villagers, by donating a certain amount of their proceeds to them. And they can then take you to the villages to visit. But these tours that go for a day or two, and I just don't have a lot of confidence that the people are seeing authentic villages.
So how can we find authentic villages then? Do you know?
Well, as I said, I know of a couple of operations that, and they're not tour companies. You can find a zillion different tour companies here in town that'll take you for the day up to the border with Myanmar or Burma. And along the way, they stop at the Golden Triangle, and you go to the Opium Museum, and you go to Chiang Sen, and you stop at a hill tribe village. And to me, those are bogus. But you can go to, for instance, a tea plantation that is locally owned, and they have partnerships with the local ethnic groups. And I think that those are pretty legitimate. So you have to kind of do a little bit of homework, do your research on the internet, and find out which entities, look at the reviews of what people say. But I really think people should shy away from these quickie tours.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a good point. Okay. Anything else about the city? So I have one question in mind, but before we go there, because it's slightly, in a different direction. Anything else you would like to add for the city?
Oh, let's see. Outside of the walled city,
Yeah.
you have different neighborhoods. So, for instance, I live, the walled city has 6 gates in it, which are the original gates. And I live south of the south gate, which is called Chiang Mai Gate. And each of the gates has a bit of a different, shall we say, atmosphere. So, Chiang Mai Gate, during the daytime, early in the morning, there's Chiang Mai Gate Market. So you have there's a big open space where people come and sell fresh produce. It's we would call it a fresh market here. In China, they call it a wet market, which people are now scared of because of the virus. But it's we're not selling wild animals here. It's just typical meats and fish and vegetables. So that's a fascinating thing to do, to go to the market and see the type of produce that's available here. And at the same time, there are open air restaurants, where people are having breakfast, people selling lottery tickets. And then in the afternoon, the entire thing converts and it becomes street food. So about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, people start rolling these metal carts from their homes to the gate, and they set up on a concrete pad that's sort of, the wall is surrounded by a moat, and there's a concrete pad over the moat at that point. So you can I could get sushi for 10 baht, which is about 33 cents a piece. I can get a fruit shake that's, about that tall with whatever fruits I want in it for 30 baht, which is about $1. I could literally eat here for $5 a day, 3 meals a day if I wanted to. There are several of those things, several of those types of markets and night markets that are fascinating to go to. There's also Worarat Market, locally called Kad Luang, because it was the original royal market. It's where all the royal family shopped. And it's sort of on the banks of the river. And you literally can find anything from food to clothes to kitchen goods to, there's a photo that you're putting up of a typical fresh food market. Yep. And what you're looking at in the second tray are fried grubs. So we have fried grasshoppers, fried crickets,
Yeah.
fried worms,
So
fried
I've
grubs.
so I've heard. So I've heard.
And then if you look a little closer, the woman in red, and there's a fruit big round with prickly, like stickers on it.
Yeah. Hold on, your microphone got disconnected. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we're
You
back.
got me?
We're back.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So that's called durian, and it
The
stinks to
fruit.
high heaven.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
tried it. I
when you're
tried it in
traveling,
Bali.
have you tried it? But it tastes good, right?
Yeah, no, you should not breathe when you eat it.
That's true. And you go into the hotels and you're not allowed to bring it into any of the hotels.
Oh, really? Because it stinks?
It stinks so bad. In fact, there's a funny story
Yeah,
that happened recently where somebody sent home durian to Germany,
yeah.
and it smelled so bad that they ended up calling out the bomb squad because they thought it was something dangerous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift to food then. Is durian something that people usually like to eat?
Oh, yeah, durian's very popular here. And it has become extremely popular with the Chinese. And so the Chinese tourists come here and they buy it up and they ship it home.
Hmm,
And so it's actually kind of a bad thing because it's driven up the price of the durian.
I see. Okay. I would assume that Thailand it was like Bali. There's a lot of fresh food, always fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. There is a lot of fresh food. So what else we can eat? Like except the fried grasshoppers, and bugs that you mentioned. Like, is there any traditional meal that you should try that?
Well, yes. And let me say first that there is no tradition of canned or packaged foods here. You might find something like palm sugar that would be in a cake that they would use, but almost everything that is used here is fresh.
Mm,
And people shop every day or every other day at the markets to get what they're cooking for that day. So probably the most famous food in Thailand is something called pad thai. It is a rice noodle that is made with eggs, tamarind sauce, green onions, peanuts, and actually tourists eat it as a meal. Thais would eat it as a snack. Aside from that, Thailand is extremely famous for its curries. So you
Oh,
have red curry, green curry, yellow curry, Penang curry, and Masaman curry. Those would be the five.
yeah.
And each one is a little bit different in terms of ingredients, but they're all made with peppers, hot peppers.
Yeah. Well, they have
And
to be
so
quite spicy, right?
yeah, some are spicier than others.
Okay.
And then there you go. Yeah, green curry paste, red curry paste. Yeah, and
I didn't know curry is so consumed in Thailand.
sorry.
I didn't know curry is so consumed in Thailand.
Oh, it's a mainstay.
All
Mm,
right.
yeah, and then you have other dishes that are basically stir fried. So you have pad grapao,
Mm-hmm.
which is basil's stir fried vegetables. Most people, of course, would have it with chicken or pork. I eat it vegetarian, and it's served with rice and basil. That's why it's called gaprao. And then all kinds of different varieties of stir fries. So stir fries with cashews, stir fries with peanut sauce. We have the uh, gosh, what we call them spring rolls. I guess maybe you might call them egg rolls. Generally served with a tamarind sauce. They can be either fresh or fried.
Mm-hmm.
There's an infinite amount of variety of what people make to eat, and it's a lot of the same ingredients, but it's made in different ways so that it tastes different.
I see. Okay, that's perfect. What about drinks then?
Um, well, drinks in terms of alcohol, I don't drink, so
I thought
I
you're gonna
can
say
only
that.
tell you.
By the way, I thought you're gonna say that. I
Yeah,
thought
no,
like, okay, now she's going to top the vegetarian, with non-alcoholic. I'm sure. And then you just spit
yeah.
it out. I'm like, okay, I knew it. No
No.
problem. Yeah, go on.
But I can only talk to what my friends have said, and they tell me that wine here is extremely expensive. They don't make any wine here, so it's all imported. Beer, they have lots of good beers here, and they're made here. So that's generally the preference of most here. And then alcohol, any of the typical things that you might think of, like gin or whiskey or bourbon or any of those things, those are all imported as well. So they tend to be pretty expensive. However, you will hear about um, what the hill people make, and all of those hill tribes are making some sort of a local, let's call it a local hooch,
Hooch?
which
What,
hooch, yeah.
what is this?
Oh, it's a term from probably Appalachian in America. It's a hooch is made with a still. They're making them with stills, with peels from potatoes and radishes and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And it's, from what I've heard, pretty potent stuff. Now, other drinks, Thailand is an amazing coffee culture. We also have a pretty strong tea culture because tea is, of course, grown here, as is coffee. You can't go 2 blocks without seeing a coffee house here. And the coffee's delicious. And it's not, so many countries nowadays have bought into this myth that the freeze dried coffee is the best thing in the world, and it's just garbage. Here, they would sneer at you if you tried to pawn that off on somebody. Here, it's true brewed coffee, and it's all different. It's cold brewed. I forget what all the different types are, but it's all espresso type stuff. Um, and then we also have a tradition of there's a Thai tea, which is a milk tea. And I had it once and I hated it, so I can't really tell you too much about it. But we also have these fruit drinks that are delicious. And we have so many absolutely fabulous tropical fruits, um, ranging from, oh my gosh, mangoes and papaya and langon and watermelon,
Hmm.
and just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so they make these amazing fruit drinks that you can kind of combine in any with any mixture of fruits that you want.
Wow. So why didn't you like the tea?
I don't, it's been so long ago since I had it. I don't really remember. Part of it is I don't like milk, and it's made with milk,
I see.
but I just did not like the taste of it.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. And what about the whiskey that is done in the hills by the indigenous people?
I've been, I actually took a boat um, and down the Mekong River from Chiang Kong all the way down to almost the Delta. And it was a it was 2-day trip in the north and then again in the south. But we stopped at some hill tribes villages there that were authentic hill tribes. And the company that I sailed with,
Hmm.
trying to think of their name now, Mekong Cruises, and they work with the hill tribes to, well, help educate the children, help them set up programs to sell things that they can make, that sort of thing. And they commit to donating a certain portion of their profits to
Hmm.
various communities that they work with. And one of those villages, I remember we had to climb up a very high sand dune in blistering heat, and the local people had come out to meet the boat, and they'd stationed themselves all about 10 feet between them so that they could hold out their hands and grab our hands to pull us up the sand dune. That's how steep it was. And that tribe specialized in making whiskey. And of course, samples were held out
Distributed.
all the way around. And I didn't try it, of course, because I don't drink. But from what I heard from the other passengers, there was no pain going back down that hill. Let's put it that way.
Well, so that basically was a magic potion.
Yeah. And we're talking about hill tribes there's no electricity
Hmm.
to these places. It's too remote for them to have phone service. They're living in absolutely the most simplistic terms. They've built cabins out of the local trees and leaves and, woven palm leaves for roofs, thatch roofs, that sort of thing. Um, they might have a teacher that comes for a few days every month to work with the kids. It's really like it was 100 years ago.
Hmm. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay. Thanks for that. I have one last question to ask you. And that is about this famous market that the train passes, and then there are stalls of street food, not street food, but vegetables like shoes, clothes, whatever you have to buy, and then everybody goes on the side, train passes, and everything goes back to normal after that. So,
Yep.
have you visited this? Have you witnessed it?
I have not. I was actually supposed to go there during this last trip in Bangkok because it's very close to Bangkok, and I just didn't make it. Too much else to do. But yeah, I mean anybody can go there, and it's pretty fascinating. I have a video of it on my blog,
Uh huh.
and they know exactly what time that train is coming through,
Yeah.
and they literally are packing up their goods when that train is a foot away. And they pull
Wow.
their canopies back and move their goods. The train goes by, and it's the opposite after the train has passed. The goods come out, the awnings come back out so they have shade.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible to watch the video. One of these days, I'm going to make it there.
It's so funny to us. Is like, whoa, like look at that, and in a way, it's perfect timing. Like it's remarkable. To them, it's like, train. Oh, okay, let's go back.
Exactly. Yeah, train's coming. Move everything. And it's not like they're hurrying around to do it. They've got it down to a precise timing.
Yeah. Do you think there is a specific location that you should go to, or anywhere on that railway uh, line, in a way, you can go?
You mean for that particular?
Yes. Where were you going to
Well,
go?
the one that you showed on the video there, that's the Mekong and market, and that's the one that is so famous. So if you just look up Maekhlong, Mekong,
Hmm.
and it's very, I think you can even get there probably by metro outside the Bangkok area. It's not too far.
What do you mean metro?
Oh, Bangkok has a sky train. It has a metro. You have metros in Bulgaria and Sofia.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know Thailand will have metro.
Oh, Bangkok is a first world city.
Makes
It's
sense.
got, mirrored skyscrapers that
Okay.
are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
100 floors high. Yeah. So we have a sky train that runs above the city on tracks. And then we have the underground, which is the metro. And you can get pretty much anywhere. Oh, and the other thing I should tell you about Bangkok, if we've got another minute.
Yeah, go on.
If you go to Bangkok and you're there on the weekend and you like markets, you must go to what's called JJ Market.
JJ
Uh,
Market.
JJ Market. I can't remember what it stands for now,
Okay.
but it is a market up in sort of the northwest part of Bangkok. You can get there by either SkyTrain or by the metro,
Yeah.
and it is something like a mile square, maybe larger. And you come to the entrance gate, and they give you a brochure that has a map of the place. And I have never gotten through the whole thing,
Wow.
and I've spent half day there at a time,
Is it this
and it's
that is on the screen
categorized.
now?
Say again?
Is this what's on the screen?
That's it. Yep.
So it's a, yeah, mile square, roughly as it said, and then all colorful stalls which are selling
Well, what
different
you're
things.
looking at are the shade, because it's hot here. So they cover the walkways between the booths with these tarps,
Okay.
and the whole market is categorized.
Mm-hmm.
So you have clothes in one area, pets in another area, sculpture in another area, food in another area, clothing or cloth, like scarves and silks and that sort of thing. You can find anything there.
Okay. So no need to go to all these shopping centers. You just go to this market, and then you can buy everything from there.
It's a different kind of
I
merchandise.
understand. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's
You're
on.
going to get more high end in something like a Siam Paragon. Yeah.
Makes sense. But you said that's on Saturdays only. Is that what you said?
Saturday and
Oh,
Sunday.
and Sunday as
And
well.
I think maybe Friday night as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Perfect. Well, it was. I was just looking at the sky train that runs over the city in a way, as you said. Quite interesting indeed. But
Oh, and they're so easy to use and cheap.
so, what would you say? Metro and these sky trains is the easiest way to travel around the city.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Oh,
But I will say it doesn't go everywhere. So if you have to go somewhere that is not close to one of those stations, the taxis are great. And you don't have to worry about negotiating a price up front.
mhm,
You just need to make sure they turn the meter on when you get in the taxi.
I see. Okay, that's a really good tip. Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Barbara. Is there anything you would like to share as an ending? Like, if you wrap it up in your words about Thailand, about the whole experience, like, what would you say?
Well, there is one thing, and like any other destination, travel destination, there are scams that go on here.
Mhm.
Probably the most famous one is when you're going into the Grand Palace, there will be a guy at the gate who will say, "Oh, sorry, Grand Palace is closed today. King of of the Netherlands coming back open this afternoon, but I can help you. This tuk-tuk will take you on a tour and you can go see the Black Buddha, and it'll only cost you $2, and then you can come back. He'll bring you back here to go to the Grand Palace this afternoon. That's all a scam.
Wow.
There is no closing of the Grand Palace. And so what they do is the tuk-tuk drivers take you to shopping centers where you will be subject to high pressure to buy high-end jewelry, high-end silks, that sort of thing. And it's harmless, but it's best to know about these things.
Mm.
So I would suggest that anybody who is planning to visit Thailand, you go online and you Google scams in Thailand and educate yourself about those scams so that when you get approached by someone, you can just laugh at them.
Oh, maybe they'll say, "Oh, the king of the Netherlands is coming. I'm here."
Don't be sucked in by any of that. Tourist police, that's another one. Oh, we are tourist police. We'll show, the mall is not open yet, but we can show you a shop that you can go to before the mall opens. You know, that sort of stuff. It's
Mm.
like I say, it's harmless.
Okay, perfect. All right. Anything else just for finishing?
Come and visit Thailand as soon as it's open. I love this country. I love the people here. And I'm just sure that your listeners will too.
I'm sure that I will too as well when this happens. But
Oh, if you come, let me know. I'll be your tour guide.
oh, thanks so much. And then we're gonna go uphill, and I'm gonna try whiskey, and I'm gonna tell you how it is.
Well, you can do that on your own. I'm staying at the bottom of the hill.
Fair point. Fair point. Let's do that. Okay. Well, Barbara, thanks so much for joining us. It was a great pleasure to discover Thailand through your eyes and through your experience. It was a great pleasure. And I'm seriously looking forward to have you in another episode if you're up for it.
Oh, I'm up for it anytime. I have nothing much to do right now because I can't travel. So
Perfect. Thanks so much once again. And I wish you a fantastic evening.
thank you. And thanks for inviting me, Pavel. Bye now.